This is EntreEd Talk, the podcast for entrepreneurial educators by entrepreneurial educators. We are your hosts, Toi Hirschman and
Amber Ravenscroft. This podcast is created by the National Consortium for Entrepreneurship Education, or EntreEd for short. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to an extra special episode of EntreEd Talk. We are delighted to be here with our featured National Entrepreneurship Week speaker, Brian Hamilton. Hamilton co-founded SageWorks, the country's first fintech company, which was one of the largest providers of software to U.S. banks. He sold the company to a leading private equity firm in 2018. He's also the founder of Inmates to Entrepreneurs, a national program that helps people with criminal records start their own small businesses, and the Brian Hamilton Foundation, which provides access to entrepreneurship to people who wouldn't otherwise have it. Hamilton holds himself many patents for his work in automating financial analysis. He is a regular guest on CNBC and is regularly quoted in and writes for all major national media publications. He's also a contributor to Inc. magazine. The first in his family to attend college, Brian holds an undergraduate degree from Sacred Heart University, where he served on the board of trustees, and an MBA from Duke University. Welcome, Brian. How are you?
Yeah. Hey, guys. How are you today? I'm saying guys because I'm from the Northeast originally, so I hope you don't take offense. I apologize.
We'll allow it. No.
All right. Okay.
I'm totally offended. I'm getting off of the podcast right now. Just kidding.
No, it's like...
We are thrilled to have you on, and I know we have so much to talk about, but we like to kick it off with kind of an entrepreneurial trajectory question. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today, and we like to ask what compelling goal drives you.
Okay. So I was born.
Oh, good. We're starting at the beginning.
Yeah, I was born. I'm not going to go back that far. I guess my story is probably very similar to a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm sure it is, actually. When I was a kid, and I mean really young, my mother said that I started businesses at like 6 and 7. I don't know how that would be possible. I don't remember that. But I know by 9 and 10, I was definitely like doing this sort of like the off businesses, whether it was like cutting lawns or, mulching beds or weeding bed gardens or whatever it was. I was definitely doing that super early on. And what happened, and I think this definitely happens with a lot of entrepreneurs, is like that just keeps going. My friends remind me, I don't remember this, but they say that I was their employer in high school. I don't remember this at all, but I had a lawn cutting business, and I guess a lot of them worked for me or whatever. I don't remember it. And then when I went to college, I did the same thing. I paid my way through college and in grad school in those days, going to Duke, and paying your way through, it was a little easier, but it was still, something that was hard to do. So my point is, I just started out, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I mean, if you look back and you did a poll of all the entrepreneurs in the US and you say, okay, how many of you did not have a lawn cutting business? It would be very, very few. I mean, we all kind of started that way. Now, once I got to grad school, that was a real awakening for me because I knew immediately, no disrespect to Duke, but very antiseptic environment, very corporate. And I knew in a week, it's like, okay, that's it. I got my destiny. I found it in reverse. This is exactly what I don't want to do long run. I don't want to do this corporate thing. And then I was like, okay, I put the stake in the ground and voila, I became an entrepreneur again. So that's kind of my journey,
That's funny because, we tried to identify the ways to teach entrepreneurs because we're EntreEd. So maybe, Amber, we should just be telling everybody to start a lawn cutting business.
Yeah, the origin.
I think that's all we need to do, right?
Yeah. Well, I think honestly, I will tell you, I think, and like, look, I don't want to go too far with this. I'm going to take it kind of slowly here to lay out my logic on that. But I will tell you that I think the earlier that people can start and the more organically they can start, the more it just becomes who they are. And I worry a lot about entrepreneurship in the United States in particular, a lot. If you go back, I just gave a lecture this morning actually about this, about 150 years ago when we had very much a society that was driven by farming. Probably most people were entrepreneurs, and then we had manufacturing being introduced. In the last 30 years, 40 years, you got these big box retailers. So despite the popularity of entrepreneurship, the fact is there's fewer people starting businesses. So there's this great downward pressure on entrepreneurs. And I could talk about that for 3 hours. I'm not going to. But my point is, I actually think, Toi, your point is well taken. The earlier we can teach people, which is why at the foundation we're teaching middle school kids and high school kids, we get them started earlier, as early as possible. It becomes part of who they are. It's not something they do, it's who they are.
We just had a really interesting podcast guest where he kind of coined the idea of this creation event where once a student has the experience of running their own lawn care business or some kind of creation or ideation event, that is really the pivotal moment for them. And I think it lends itself really well to what you're describing as your own trajectory.
Yeah. But by the way, I don't mean to impose my view of the universe on you guys. I'm just one person, but I think often that's left out of the conversation. I've been around the block. I mean, I've done landscaping in my late 20s. I got out of like this top business school and I did coin laundromats. My father thought I was crazy. He was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't really know, but I know that I don't want to go the corporate route." And then I ran a tech company for 20 years. And, I grew up, we didn't have a lot, which is an understatement. It's really true. I mean, everybody says it, but with us, it was really true. I mean, we just did not have a lot of resources. My point is that I think often left out of the conversation are some obvious things like go get money, go get wealth. What's wrong with that? Like a reason people go into business is to make money. It sounds crass and vulgar, but like we need to really make that clear. Like for me, when I started, I needed money. Whether it was like buying Snickers bars, which I think were about 15 cents in the day, right? If I wanted extra stuff, I had to go make money. So I think introducing this to education is extremely important. Why do you want to do it? We want to have freedom. We want to have autonomy. We want to create. We want to add to our community. We want to, add value. Yeah, but I want to make money. I don't get into business unless I want to make money. And that needs to be clear. And it is absolutely, it's not the sole driver, absolutely not, but it is a driver.
I think that's powerful. That's come up as a theme a couple times in our conversations as well. So I am curious. So you went from a coin laundromat to SageWorks. So could you talk a little bit about that process? And being the first fintech company, you were definitely a disruptor in the industry. So what was that like?
Well, that's such a good question. The transition between coin laundromats and software, here's how it is. I did this and I did that. No, there's no relationship. Here's what really happened. I got out of business school. I think I was 27 and I didn't have a lot of money. I had some, but not very much at all. Business school is expensive. And I wanted to get into a business that I could get into. So I started one coin laundry, and I developed this little chain. But I always had in my mind the dream to do something, quote, bigger. I always knew that. And I also wanted to have this radical thing. Don't tell anybody. It's a secret between us. Don't tell anyone. But was to actually be able to own my company and not give it away. So I wanted money, which is true. It's kind of funny, actually. The SageWorks, it became a very successful company. It was started from coin laundromat proceeds. It's really true. Well, I sold the laundromats in order to start SageWorks, but I really wanted to own the business. I didn't want to give my company away to venture capitalists and PE firms, or worse, have to work with them, which would have been even worse. So to me, I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to get my feet wet in this whole thing. And that's kind of how that all went down. And then, of course, SageWorks, the software company was born. Sarah and I started that together, and the rest is history.
Wow. So after you sold SageWorks, you went into philanthropy. What made you decide to do that? What made you decide to not get into starting another company or?
Yeah. Well, again, good, great. That's a great point. So I may start another company, but about 27 years ago, I had a friend, Reverend Harris. He's a super great guy. He was doing like this Bible ministry stuff at local prisons. He asked if I wanted to go along to a local prison while he did his thing. And I loved being around him. He's the type of guy who walks in the room and the whole room gets light. Just a great human being. and I like being around them. So I went to a local prison. I think it was Orange Correctional Facility in North Carolina, and he was doing sort of the ministry stuff. And at one of the breaks, one of the guys, it was a men's prison, one of the guys came up to me, and we were just making small talk. I said, well, what are you going to do when you get out of prison? And it's a very long answer, by the way. I apologize. But anyway, what are you going to do when you get out of prison? And he said, I'm going to get a job. And I remember that was the eureka moment, or the light bulb moment for inmates to entrepreneurs. I was like, wow, that might be hard to do. I didn't say it to him. I don't want to discourage him, but I'm like, how are you going to get a job when you've been in prison? It might be tough. And then that was the moment when I came up with the idea of Inmates to Entrepreneurs, which was teaching people who have been incarcerated how to start their own businesses. And that started out, I think it was like 29, 28 years old, something like that. And that's just started, like, all these things always start, the movements, any movements always start with a person or two people, right? So Reverend Harris and I would go around to prisons, and we would teach people how to start low capital businesses. It's been a big part of my life. I did it right through running SageWorks. And then when I sold SageWorks, I thought, let's extend this to middle schools, to high schools. We're going to do more with people in prison, but let's extend this theme of creating entrepreneurs, especially in groups of people who have poverty, or, they don't have a lot of access to resources. And that's because it's been such a huge driver in my life. I wanted to kind of share that vision.
I'm going to skip ahead on a question because I like to stalk our guests' Twitter. So I'm going to preface with that. But your Twitter had a recent tweet that I thought was really powerful. And it said, a lot of us live in a sustainable level of dissatisfaction. Right. I think sometimes you really have to hit rock bottom to reach for great things. And I think that lends itself really well to what you just spoke about. So can you talk a little bit about that thought and like kind of your views on leadership in an entrepreneurial lens?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I, like all great things, it's stolen a little bit. I took it and I twisted it into sort of my world, but I think it might have been Emerson. I can't remember. But basically, the quote is, most people lead lives of quiet desperation, like sort of, they're not completely miserable, but they're sort of, it's like low grade misery. It really struck me when I read that. It was a long time ago. And I was like, wow, I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? You're not horribly miserable, but you're sort of just going along. You're going through the motions. It's like that movie Groundhog Day. I love that movie. Every day you wake up, it's the same thing. And it's just not fulfilling. And I think there's a couple things that move you off of that. Number one is you go even lower, and then you hit real rock bottom. And when you go to prison, that's pretty bottom, right, as it goes. So that is a time in your life where something's going to move you to something else. And I think the other thing is maybe a great dream. I want to change something. You got to get moved off of this sort of status quo level. But that quote always struck me. And my quote's a derivative of that, or this kind of idea, which is, you got to get real low to go real high in some ways. I think, I know it sounds like a bumper sticker, but I really believe that.
No, and I mean, when I read it, I thought immediately, because, our work at EntreEd is really focused on K-12 education and entrepreneurship. And I think it speaks to, how are we inspiring greatness in our students if we're maintaining a similar level of dissatisfaction towards learning? And so I just think it had huge impacts in that lens too.
Yeah. That's why I agreed to do this, by the way. Thank you so much for inviting me. But I'm really, well, I don't want to go too far with it, but you'll totally relate to it because it's what you're doing, right? Like, so I always got people at the end. I mean, these are people at the end of the food chain. They are the sausage that's made. It's not to say adults can't change, but you're dealing with people from very adverse childhood environments. Because statistically, look at it, who goes to prison? I mean, it is predictable who's going to go there. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying individual responsibility is not in the equation. I'm saying it's predictable. They're in prison. Their life is not baked. We can change it, right? But to your point, let's get to the kids. Let's get to people when they're earlier. The cement's not as dry, right? We can mold it. We can shape it. We can do things with it. And entrepreneurship is not the path for everybody. Absolutely not. But it should be available to everybody, especially people who are coming maybe from backgrounds where, that are harder, basically, if you look at I don't like the word disadvantage, but I can't think of a better one. If you look at every group of people in the history of this country, you look at them, whether it's people of color or women or Irish immigrants or Asian American immigrants, it doesn't really matter. Look at every disadvantaged group. How have they come up? Well, they should be encouraged. We should all encourage everybody to go to college. But statistically, they don't have equal access to education, but they've all gone up and risen up through entrepreneurship. And if we lose that, we're going to lose a generation of people.
Yeah, that's exactly the way we see things. And, we deal a lot with rural schools and kids that are in that situation that have very little. And I always think of this young man when I was a principal, and he came into my office, and I was just starting to understand entrepreneurship myself because I was in education. But he came into my office, and he was one of the most unbelievably talented welders. It was a career tech high school. Okay. Unbelievably talented welders you've ever seen. I mean, this kid could stand on his head and hit this, make the perfect bead, So, I asked him what he was going to do, because I think you could walk out of here and get $65,000. He had that mindset of, no, I'm just going to go do what the rest of my family does and collect a check and go, it was just a very depressing kind of like,
yes,
there's no hope there. You're not even seeing a different idea than what you're living in. And that's what that entrepreneurship does for students. And I think you've probably seen it more than us, but when you see the kids get it and they light up, and we interviewed 2 young ladies last week, and I mean, they just oozed enthusiasm for what they were creating and what they were doing. And it was, like Amber said, that creation event, that experience of that will keep them going on that path.
Right. So. Yeah. And we got to do that as early as possible. And once again, I mean, I know this is why you have your program. It's definitely why we have our foundation, for sure, is that financial capital. I mean, I've been around this so long. I mean, but financial capital, is it important? Sure, I guess so. But the most important capital is idea capital, it's information capital. And we have a whole bunch of people who don't have access to the ideas. Like even when I got out of Duke, I mean, it's a good school, I wouldn't even think of going into the cell phone business or the software business. It was like, what? I mean, I was from a background where I don't know how to explain to you. You get honed in early on in the limits of what you're a fish and you're in this thing of water, and the water is not big enough, and your growth is formed to the water, to your environment. So we got to introduce this stuff to people early so they know, no, this is also for you. You can do this, but it has to be taught really early on.
There's a research study that we reference at EntreEd sometimes around the idea of lost Einsteins, which is exactly what you're talking about, and how they, especially in rural regions of the country, they don't have access or exemplars. And so you can't be what you cannot see. And I think that lends itself perfectly to exactly what you're saying. And exactly the mission of your foundation and our work is that entrepreneurship is an economic equalizer. And we often uplift that. If they get access to entrepreneurial thinking, then they open up whole new pathways for themselves.
Early. That's exactly right. Early. That's why I'm here. Exactly. Early. And I want to be upbeat. I mean, we're optimistic. We're entrepreneurs. We're trying to drive, make things, the companies better, the world better. But I was in a school about a month ago and was dealing with people. It happened to be a school with a lot of people of color, it wasn't the greatest neighborhood, all that. And had a fascinating conversation with they were primarily, for whatever reason, a bunch of girls in high school. And I did a big session to the school. And then afterward, I met with a group. And I love talking to the kids. It's fascinating. Like I just ask them questions. Hey, what's going on in your life? And it's amazing the perception they have. They know what's going on. They understand their environment. They understand how the world looks at them. And I mean, I almost get emotional talking about it, because to me, I'm 56. The older I get, the younger these kids look. These girls were 14, 15. And the amazing thing is they knew, to your point, not knew, I'm not going to say they can't change, but they almost knew what their path was going to be. And it really makes me emotional because I'm like, my goodness, you're 14, you're 15, and inside of you, you're baked, and you're not baked to the level where you could be. And it just absolutely breaks my heart because they're smart. You can see the questions and you see the eyes going, and they've got it, but their environments are baking them in. And it's just a shame,
Hi all, we are super excited to offer an exclusive discount for our listeners to attend this year's EntreEd Forum taking place on November 18th and 19th in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and experiential learning opportunities to help you ignite entrepreneurial thinking and integrate entrepreneurship into your learning communities. Use promo code EntreEd Talk to receive 5% off of every individual registration. Again, that's promo code EntreEd Talk. To learn more about the forum and register, visit www.entre-ed.org today and subscribe for updates as we launch new things happening every week as part of the planning for the forum. Thanks. See you there. Could you talk a little bit about the middle and high school programming that you are doing and kind of what that looks like in the schools?
Yes, I will happily do that. I mean, basically, our program for middle school kids and high schools, very simple, very, very simple. I go into the schools or school systems and teach them how to start a low capital service business for less than $500, a lawn service, a car detailing business, a babysitting service. You're being an entrepreneur, right? Absolutely. How do you do that? How do you use social media? How do you use flyers? How can you make money in a week or 3 days or a day or 2 weeks quickly? And I break it down very, very simply. Not necessarily why you should want to and all that, but here's the fishing pole, throw it out, look at the bobber, the fish bites, pull it in. Very, very practical, very short. You know how the kids are. My attention span when I was that age, it was about 6 minutes. Theirs is about 20, but in 20 minutes, exactly what to do. That's what I teach them.
I think that lends itself so well to this idea of the gig economy and how we're moving so much further into that space. And, these kids today are going to have to be scrappy, and starting young and getting them in that mindset of it can be the low hanging fruit,
right?
And spur into new things, I think is super important.
I love the idea that it's fast. Get a win fast because that shows them that they can keep going.
Right. And I want to go back to something you said, Toi. We got to be uplifting here. Things can be better. We got to think that way. And we not think that way. We got to know that. Remember, if we can just touch a few people, this is the most scalable thing. It's got the largest multiplier effect. We reach one Bill Gates or one whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Somebody that we can touch. You're creating thousands of jobs, and that just multiplies through an entire economy. So we don't need everybody to do it. And so I think that's a positive point on this whole thing.
Yeah, I think we are all inherently very hopeful and optimistic about the movements that are taking place in education and beyond. And I do want to highlight, I enrolled in the start course. So I do want to highlight that as a really great resource for even beyond, K-12 education. So could you talk a little bit about that online course and kind of what led to its development?
Yeah, sure. So it's really funny. I do these things and people at the staff are always like, you never promote us. I was like, so I'm going to put a little plug in. We got something coming out. I got to mention it for you though, because of what you do. It's called Starter High, and it's specifically for, middle school kids and high school kids. And we got success stories in there, and we show the B-roll of them doing their stuff. And it's coming out like in the next couple of weeks. But our online curriculum is based upon this. We looked at all the stuff that was out there, and you got some great programs, about mindset, and you need this and you need that. But to me, a lot of it smacked of an MBA program. It was very, step 1, step 2, do a business plan, go get an investor. No. We just simplified it. But of course, in the online course, we get into it in a lot of details. I think it's about 8 hours. But every detail that you need to start a low capital service business. It will help any entrepreneur, even a tech entrepreneur, but it's really geared toward these sort of low capital businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a super comprehensive resource. I just started, so I'll circle back with you when I graduate the course.
Well,
But,
we'll send you a certificate when you finish.
Oh, thank you. I'll be honored. But it's a great resource for anybody that's interested in, like you said, low capital, just to get your feet wet in this space. I think it's an awesome thing to uplift.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Starter High. Is that going to have an app too, so the kids could kids do it on their phones? And
no, I don't think so. But it's a good point, actually. And everything's moving to an app. It's I don't think so. I think it's some kind of memory thing, right? I should know this. I was in the computer science business, but
I think that I'm looking forward to seeing that, because that's where we meet with teachers, and our whole purpose is like, we're not selling a curriculum, because like you just said, like everyone's got this step-by-step stuff that's not really what you want, so we're not doing that. We like to help teachers and students find their own way through this, whatever makes sense for them. Right. But they're always looking for really cool resources. So I'm excited to share that with them. They because just any teachers sometimes don't really identify as being entrepreneurial, and so this is like anything that you can give them to help is always great.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about technology. It's completely scalable. We can get it out everywhere, and we've gotten a lot of really good reviews on it. But frankly, I think Starter High is going to be even better. I mean, Starter U has done very well. I mean, it really truly has the reviews and all that. But Starter High is for the kids, and it's really better than listening to some old guy like me. I'll talk a little bit, but then the next person comes on is the 12-year-old or the 16-year-old who actually has started the business using the principles, and it's going to be. I'm really excited about it.
And that testimony itself is so powerful. Like you said, you have to be able to see yourself in those roles, and you have to be able to kind of visualize that. And I think having student testimonials are huge in terms of reaching and making an impact for some of those populations that might not see themselves in that light. That's
right.
Great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Since our audience is educators, and we talked a lot about, kind of inspiring hope and viewing that, do you have any advice that you would give to educators, maybe from your own experiences in education or your experiences in the classroom now? Like what could they do to inspire this?
Well, here comes the controversial part.
Let's go. I love it.
That's hilarious. That's funny. Well, so let me frame this first. I'll put this picture on this. And I always say this to the kids in high school, because I guess as I've gotten, I look a little geeky or something. I don't know what it is, but I go, what do you think my GPA was in high school? And they all raise their hands. What was my GPA? And I go, 4.0, 3.8, whatever. My GPA in high school, I think, was like a 1.9. I mean, really, and those were the days before AP courses. So if you got a 1.9, it means that wasn't like the distinct number. It was a mean average, which means I had a bunch of D's and I think some F's splattered across my, course grades and all that. I wasn't a great student, but, I've often reflected on the question, so let me get to it. And I know it's sort of a platitude. We've heard about this. This guy didn't go to college, blah, blah, blah. But I was there, and I will say this, that I don't know how to say this without coming across patronizing, but I'm just going to say it. When I was in high school, because I was a nincompoop, I mean, it just didn't work for me. I don't know how to explain to you. It didn't work. I don't know any other way to say it. That environment, period one, the bell, you got 3 minutes, can I go to the bathroom and all, that didn't work for me. So I guess I would say this, that as educators, I don't know, right? I mean, you got to educate, you got to do the reading and writing and arithmetic and all this stuff. I mean, I totally get it, but I would just be open to the possibility that some people are not just lazy, they're uninspired. For me, I just didn't want to be there. I couldn't connect that with my life, so I guess don't give up on people, because people will definitely surprise you. There's always, I've coached hundreds of people, thousands at this point as an employer. And I always take people and I'm like, look, maybe you're a little lazy on this point or whatever. I don't really know, but you're not motivated because this stuff doesn't mean anything to you. So I know it's a platitude, and I know, Toi, this is hard to do. I get it, but trying to make that curriculum relate in some way to what's real for them. because to me, it was a disparate universe. I mean, I went to school in the day, my mother would load me up on Captain Crunch, sugar. Can you imagine? Captain Crunch is 100% sugar. It's yellow sugar.
It's still good.
Get a big bowl of Captain Crunch, put me at a seat. I'm holding on to the seat. I could barely sit in my seat. Had so much energy. School just didn't mean anything to me. So if we can make things available to them, whether it's welding or entrepreneurship, maybe it's art, let's open up things to people to give them different avenues for success. But I guess you probably already know that.
Amen, brother. Amen. That's the sweet stuff right there. But we see kids like that all the time. I'm going to talk about it. I was just at a conference with my own child because he is exhibiting apathy towards school. And I'm like, well, not really. It's just, it's not fitting. It's not fitting him. And so we've seen entrepreneurship and sometimes just giving kids like that entrepreneurial win can change the whole game for school. Yeah. Discipline goes down, teachers are happier. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. And
so I'm going to get a little edgy. Here.
Go there.
Edgy. Yes. But I don't know to fall in sexism and all this other stuff. But, I'm going to speak as being like a boy, a man, whatever. I think it might be even more applicable for boys because I don't know if that's true statistically. You're the experts, but to me, I look at one of my sons. It didn't work for him. Now he's like a Rhodes Scholar. It's amazing. He really turned it on in college, but I think there's something to the energy or the connection of the curriculum to their lives, and it really pains me because I worry there's people like me out there who just didn't connect to it, and they just don't care. You know what I mean? I didn't care. It was a total. I feel bad for my father, who's always being brought down, and especially in high school, to the counselor. And Brian's not doing this; he's doing that, and I feel bad for him now. I put him through hell. So for your son, he's going to be fine, and maybe he's going to be fine. But I think getting them connected into other things where you learn discipline, you learn how to apply yourself, but maybe it's not just education. We live in the whole world. Why is it that everybody has to be an A student? Why? What happened? It's only the last 30 years that's happened, where we all got to be A students. Why? I mean, you can do other things and you can excel in other things, but we have this whole psychology that if you're not an A student, or God forbid, suppose you don't go to college, I think that is hurting our society, and it's definitely having a depreciating effect on entrepreneurism.
That, we've taken a lot of stuff out of school that used to be there that should, a lot of those options are gone now. And a lot of the career tech options, there's no competition anymore, which I think is a big boy thing, to your point about boys want to compete. They put a bunch of them out on a playground and watch, right. But we can't do that anymore. And we've taken a lot of things out that I think were, at least in some ways, inspiring.
Do you mind? I don't know how much time. Just a little plug there. A little plug for your son and for one of my sons too. I remember going to a wonderful lady, Rebecca Early. I went down and I couldn't believe it. When my first son goes to high school, I couldn't believe it. He was putting like 3 hours a day into school. And I said, Rebecca, she's a beautiful counselor person, really nice lady. I said, what's going on here? And she goes, here's what's happened, Brian. Over the last 30 years, we got so focused on foreign competition, the other countries are doing better, blah, 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 that we are trying to model ourselves on those societies. And the good news is, of course, you compete more, but the bad news is we're losing the flexibility of what we're teaching the kids. And I don't know whether that's true, but I was amazed at how hard high school is today compared to when I was there. And even then I did poorly.
Kind of work and the pressure's insane right now.
Oh yeah, I know.
We're still in elementary, so I got a little time.
I'm sorry to say that. I don't want to give you a bad omen. I'm sorry.
The middle school's next. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. But I don't know. I think that that's where entrepreneurship solves a lot of problems. I think that
I do.
If we can give kids that opportunity and start building those mindsets, I think that's so important. Of course, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Of course.
And make it available, make this available as an option. Make lots of things available as an option. And like the buffet, you go to the buffet and I like the corn. I don't want the mashed potatoes. I'll take the chicken. Like that's how life should be. We're opening up possibilities rather than jamming everybody in. If you don't go to Harvard, you don't exist. And I'm like, that's total bunk. That's ridiculous. That's not how, it's also not how our country grew to have so much abundance as we have right now. It's definitely not how this country evolved anyway.
I think that's a really powerful message in light of the fact that this is like our National Entrepreneurship Week podcast episode as well, because the purpose of that movement is really to uplift diversity in entrepreneurship and to uplift those voices of entrepreneurship that come from the communities that are under-recognized in that space. So I'm thrilled that we could highlight your work at the foundation and the online course that's working to provide access to those resources. So we're really appreciative of your time.
Of course. No, it's wonderful to be here. Yeah.
Our final question is usually, how can people connect with the work of your organization? What are the best outlets to reach out and touch base with your team or yourself? How would you like them to learn more about your work?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our foundation is appropriately named the Brian Hamilton Foundation. So it's easy for me to remember it, but it's brianhamilton.org. And that's Brian with an I, the Irish way, by the way. brianhamilton.org. We've got online courses. We're coming out with Starter High, which we're really excited about. We also have in-person courses and things like that. And that's how you kind of get in touch with us.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, we appreciate your time tremendously. And we're excited to help uplift these resources in our network, especially for educators that are interested in this space too. So
they'll really like to have that as a resource.
Great to meet you. And by the way, keep them away from Captain Crunch. Evil. That's not good.
That's just for me. I hide it in the closet so no one else gets it.
Yeah, that's low carb, right? That's low carb.
Yeah, mostly air.
Well, thank you, Brian. You take care.
Bye-bye now. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.